Hi everyone from Giaco. After living over a decade in Finland, I decided to help building a bridge between the English-speaking people living in Finland and the local community. Listen to my podcast to discover the most interesting and incredible people from Finland and to dig into Finnish culture and controversial issues that impact all of us in our daily life. And now sit back and enjoy listening. Bye! Hi everyone. The following is a conversation with Anders Adlercreutz from the Swedish People Party, SKP. With him we talk about COVID times in Finland, immigration and the political system in Finland. Please enjoy. Okay. Hi Anders.
Hi.
Welcome and thank you for being here. Would you please quite fast tell something about you, your elevator pitch, 10 seconds, who are you and what do you do?
My name is Anders Adlercreutz. I'm a member of parliament, chair of a parliamentary group. My background is that of an architect, so I entered politics quite late in my life. I live outside Helsinki in Kirkkonummi. We have 5 kids, and of course that's also a big part of being me.
Yes. So family is definitely one of your core value.
Yes, well, I don't know if you could call family a value, but of course, I think the word family values, I think it's kind of mistreated often. But of course, I mean, I'm a father of 5. I know what it means to bring up children. My day-to-day life is fairly chaotic as a result of that. And then I try to juggle and keep things afloat somehow.
And so you said you had a background in architecture. So do you have is there some interest you have, and how did you move from that to politics?
Yes, I have a background in architecture. I mean, as a kid I was always interested in politics, and I had this strange fascination for foreign policy, and especially American politics, which is quite strange. But I didn't enter politics because I think I had a biased view of what politics is. I thought that these political youth organizations are somewhat dubious. I thought that if I'd enter one of those, then somebody would try to impose their ideas on me. I thought that would somehow narrow my freedom of thought. So I didn't enter politics, but I did start to study architecture. And of course, architecture in many ways is influencing society. When you're an architect, you have to know how people live, what their needs are, what makes people feel safe, unsafe, what are the daily needs, how does life work, how does society work, what creates feelings, how do people move, how do they do their daily routines.
So you wanted to make an impact on society already at that time, and you found in architecture the tool, the way to do it.
Yes, and with architecture, of course, I mean you do that, and you try to solve the daily situations, the basic problems of society, but with the tool of an architect. I mean, building houses, building roads, building landscapes, building cities. And of course, when you're an architect, you also learn problem solution. You learn how you have to negotiate, you have to somehow create a synthesis of all the different needs that are projected onto, for example, a building, the user, the investor, the builder, the society in general, and then you come up with something as a synthesis of that. And of course, being a politician, it's not totally different.
So you have been practicing these negotiation abilities already there.
Yes.
Because I understand now. I see the connection with politics, and I think politics probably, in my head at least, the effect and the consequence of actions from politicians, they have probably a longer term of effect. So they affect people for longer term.
Yes.
So did you see in architecture this kind of? Do you think stuff in architecture for such a long span of time, and did you see this change when you went to politics? Were you able to then change and think like for a longer period of time what the impact is?
Well, I mean, one thing when you come from outside of politics, and I kind of came from the other world into politics, often people think that okay, politics is so slow. I mean, nothing happens immediately.
Yes.
But then as an architecture, of course, you see the result of your work. But the the process can be very slow. From the first idea to a building being built, I mean, it can easily take 5 years or 10 years.
Yes.
The economic situation changes. Maybe the zoning regulations. You get into trouble with the zoning regulations. You don't get the permit.
Yeah, you go back to.
Yeah, you go back and forth. Yeah. So you really have to have. You have to have patience, and you have to be able to accept uncertainty and that things don't move as quickly as you want. And of course, in politics, it's the same thing. I mean, a legislation can easily take 5 years. If you one parliamentary period start thinking about something, start talking about something, you plant the seed of the idea in the people around you, and then suddenly you see that the thought is being adopted by somebody else, and suddenly you're not the only one who speaks about it.
It spreads.
But 10 people are speaking about it, and then maybe after the next elections you might get a few lines of text on this idea into the what we call the hallitusohjelma, the governmental program, and then suddenly things start moving forwards. And that's that's a slow process, but it's not very different from the process of a building project, for example.
Do you think that normal people see actually this, the time frame that it takes for things to happen? Because as a spectator from outside, from the government and the chambers, you actually might think that like, why things are not taken in action fast, and why things... So maybe this process is not well thought, well, it's not well expressed to the public.
Yes, it might be, and in a way, I think that fastness might be overvalued. I think there's a quality in things not moving too fast, that you have to consider, you have to weigh pros and cons and ponder. So in a way, I think that a certain stiffness or a slowness in the political system, it's also a quality, and maybe a guarantee, a security in a way for things not moving too fast, for society not overreacting to something, but it moves slightly slowly behind the change that might drive.
It's true. Actually, this makes me think about the COVID times. Of course, we might not be out of the woods yet, but that was probably a specific time in which all the processes were taken at maximum speed.
Yes.
And so decisions were made in Finland quite slowly still compared to other countries, but around the world some decisions were made like one day from the other.
Yes.
And then put in place, and actually demanding people to maybe not go out, and there were restrictions for businesses. So definitely it's a good point that analyze, ponder, and think really truly all the possible outcome and scenario. It's actually probably a value, rather than a problem.
Yeah, and during the COVID times, I mean, as we went on, we tried to, of course, learn from the experience of different countries that might be only a few weeks ahead of us, or maybe a few months ahead of us, and every once in a while this mantra started going that, okay, now we should use the South Korean model or the New Zealand model, or beware of the Swedish model, or whatever. And that's, of course, a difficult situation where you really don't, I mean, you don't have the answer sheet. You don't know what really works. You just have to guess. And then probably try not to overreact, but beware of not reacting at all. Of course, to some extent also because of political pressure, because everybody was following around, and suddenly everybody was an epidemiologist.
Yeah, that's true also.
Epidemiologist.
Yeah. And of course then you also, because you cannot stay there as a politician and just think. You are responsible for making decisions. So decision had to be made. How was the experience for a politician, for you? How was the COVID experience? The beginning and the hardest time?
Yes, I mean, I remember it was in March of 2020. All the the chairmen of the different parties were invited to the president.
Yes.
And I went there instead of our chairman because she was hindered. So I went there instead. And everybody there thought that we would be discussing this immigration crisis that was growing at
Yes.
the border between Greece and Turkey. But actually, no, he more wanted to talk about what we call the Valmiuslaki, which is a law that we put in place in case of like these special emergencies.
Yes.
Because in case
Who
of
wanted
war,
to talk? You?
the president.
The president.
Yes. And at that point, it was a law that nobody was very much aware of. Or say it wasn't in the daily speech as it then suddenly was a few
Yes.
weeks later on when we started applying that Valmiuslaki to all kinds of different things, and a few days after that, we were already talking about heavy restrictions that none of us would have thought were possible only a week earlier.
So it struck you the same way
Yes,
it did to the public.
yes, and suddenly you had to. I mean, things that you thought that weren't possible in a democratic society.
Yes.
So suddenly were things that we took into use. I mean, we restricted schools,
Yeah, yeah.
daycares, and then a few weeks later, actually, we cut off Uusimaa.
Yes.
Which I still think was a dubious decision that
Yeah,
wasn't very
yeah.
much based in anything, but it came to some extent because of political pressure and to some extent because
To show that some action are taken.
yes, and to some extent because nobody really knew how to react. So it was
Yes.
like a better safe than sorry
Yeah, sorry,
approach
yes,
more
yes,
than
yes.
anything else. And I think in the beginning, the discussion wasn't really very fact-based. We thought that we could cut ourselves off from the epidemic by maybe closing the border to a country in a
Yes.
world where you can't really do that,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
people move anyway. Then you thought that, okay, we can cut off the rest of Finland by closing off the whole
Yes.
capital region. Because there are
Yeah.
people are very sick and they are maybe
Yeah, the proximity between
Yes.
people is
Yes.
is more.
And then at some point you thought that, if you regulate the traffic between Helsinki and Stockholm, it's not really different from regulating traffic between Helsinki and Tampere. But somehow the national border became an issue
Yes.
when you're talking about a virus that doesn't really
yeah.
care about the passport that people
Yeah,
have on both sides.
true.
So moving from
Absolutely.
Helsinki to Stockholm is the same thing as moving from Helsinki to Tampere.
Yeah.
And we started creating these superficial borders between countries through this epidemiological narrative that
Yes.
that really, I mean, I think they can't really they couldn't really stand closer scrutiny. But we adapted slowly and tried to make as good decisions as possible that then maybe in retrospect weren't all that good, and many of them weren't maybe not even necessary.
Well, we see now concretely China situation and how like protection and closing the borders and
Yes.
certain kind of strict rule actually has postponed
Yes.
the boom. So probably again this testing and trying and being anyway pondered, because Finland has never taken the restriction to an extreme.
No.
So it's been always a bit
No.
balancing and changing. It's been like a quite like you say, juggling with things, but it's been probably quite a fruitful strategy.
Yes.
But were you given let's say like this different information that what was released to the public? But if you are invited for a meeting to discuss and you even don't know yourself what the topic is,
Yes.
I wonder like how fast actually politicians got information to base their decision upon. How ahead of time
yeah.
you were.
Yes. I mean, the information that we got weren't really different from the information the public got in general. Of course, we had these scenarios that maybe were not always very official. I mean, scenarios that THL, the health authority,
Yes.
gave us different outcomes, how this might evolve if we don't make certain decisions. But in general, I mean, there wasn't any amount of secret information somehow.
Yes.
I think people just tried try to kind of guess and evaluate and try to weigh different risk scenarios against each other. But in general, I think what was different in the Finnish approach compared to, for example, the approach in many Latin countries is that that we have a different mindset maybe on personal freedom.
Yes.
So somehow regulating that people can't go out probably wouldn't have been possible in Finland. Yeah. And actually 1 year later, the government tried to pass such legislation which would have prohibited going to certain kinds of sports and whatever. I remember, a legislation that we were very critical about, and that then didn't pass the constitutional test here in Parliament.
It was unconstitutional.
But I think that was just an example of how maybe the standard here is. The standard varies from country to country, and things that might work in one legislative tradition might not work in another one. And here in Finland, the constitutional freedoms are maybe held in higher regard.
And that's what happened then in Sweden, that they even didn't want to go that deep.
So they went even, they did even less than.
It's fascinating. This, I think, also as a foreigner, when I was looking and seeing this, that certain law were tried to push forward, but then they were rejected because they were not according to constitution. Yes. I thought it was extremely nice show and display that actually the law works for the people.
Yes.
Because in the time of Corona, of course, it is a wider phenomena that disinformation and this kind of theory of power, that there are lobbies or people behind the scene moving the pieces on the chess, and you see in some countries where some rules were applied, they were borderline to the constitution, but they were just imposed. I think it made me feel safe that no matter who will come to run Finland, the law anyway, it's above the person, and it's for the people. Because of course also as you were saying, some of the decisions were borderline with a democratic point of view. Did we elect this person then to do this to us?
Yeah.
And of course, extreme measures, extreme situation, extreme measures. But that was a great display of the fact that people can feel safe, that here there will not come a dictator suddenly to impose something.
Yes.
Because that was, for example, the American style, where actually the responsibilities were given down until mayors of cities, so they could decide by themselves almost what they do in their own land. That created a mess. Of course, they have different kind of system, but it was more up to whoever was there sitting in the chair.
Yeah. And in Finland, the system with which we judge the constitutionality of different proposals, it's kind of apolitical, but it's a political body. It's the constitutional committee here that is where parliamentarians sit. So when they go into that chamber, they somehow have to take off their political coats and try to look at it objectively. Yeah. And so far, it has worked. In these matters, it worked fairly well. So even though there was maybe a political pressure to try to put things through, they had to accept the fact that there are constitutional problems, and then they had to vote it down and say that it can't pass.
Yeah. Of course, all this is combined to one of the best part of Finnish culture, that is the responsibilities towards the other people, and the fact that people tend in this situation, or even just sitting in the bus, they tend to think what is my impact to the other people around me, and how do I influence the other? So definitely this made this power play or these theories of power to just drop in Finland. I think we don't have such extremism like we see and we can see in social medias and in other countries like UNA in USA that anyway brought things quite to an extreme.
Yes.
So I think that these things make people feel safe and feel trusted. And I trusted also what was told by the Finnish government.
Yeah.
So I think I wonder. I don't know how many hours Anna Marina slept. I don't know how many you slept. What kind of trauma you got? But the communication to the public was solid, constant.
Yes.
And it gave to the people a bit of well, no one was sure about anything, but when you are talking as a politician, how you felt it, and me as a citizen, I was feeling anyway that, like, okay, people there are really thinking, and the team behind making the scenario and possibilities are professional, and the way things are communicated to us are also well thought, well explained, and in a quite easy to understand language.
Yes.
Because it wasn't like the political way of talking, like going around and using words that people don't understand. It was targeted to everyone. So now you are preparing for the next elections.
Yes.
And I guess you are again, well, in between all this, also Russia decided to do some of its own tricks.
Yes.
So, of course, it's been quite a busy time.
Yes.
And then between all this and maybe pandemic, third, fourth wave coming, but you have to start thinking about the next elections and again give a wide long-term perspective of what your work will be.
Yes.
How do you go about this? How we were talking about family values. I guess you belong to a party for a reason.
Yes.
And you have certain ideas that anyway turn you and steer you towards certain. So how does the plan for the next election go?
From a personal point.
From your personal point.
Yes, of course. I mean, this will be my third parliamentary election, so you can't avoid, to some extent, the fact that, of course, some preparation work was done 8 years ago and some 4 years ago.
Yeah, this long term.
Yes, and you are still the same person you were in the previous election, so the themes are still pretty much the same. Of course, the world has changed, so you probably adjust yourself a little bit. Some of the things that you said that you wanted to do might be done already, and then you change perspective accordingly. But of course, I mean, there's work to be done in Parliament still. We have 2 months of sessions still ongoing. At the same time, you prepare for the next election. You have a coalition government. I'm a part of a party who is inside the coalition. It's a governmental party. Of course, we have 5 parties in government, but of course, in a way, we also compete against each other with these coming elections in mind.
Yeah.
So usually, I mean, what usually happens at the end of a period is that there's some infighting might be the wrong word, but even the tensions for natural reasons rise inside government, and that's of course a thing that you have to tackle somehow, and at the same time maybe try to focus on the daily work, and then at the same time you have to plan your own campaign and do the campaign work that is needed. So it's not easy. Of course, it's tricky in many ways, but it's a part of the political system we have. Then in Finland, the election system is different from what it is in many countries. If you compare the Finnish system to the Swedish one, for example, here you are a candidate as a person.
Yes.
So people vote for you as a person, whereas, for example, in Sweden, you only vote for the party.
Yes.
And then the party sets the people in a certain order.
But here, when you are elected, you receive the votes, but the party also receives the benefits.
Yes.
So anyway, you have to have the support of the party, even if you have some internal some discussion or some different opinions. You support each other. Yes.
I mean, you support each other, but you can't avoid the fact that, of course, there might be a competition inside the party also for the seats.
Yes.
So it's kind of a tricky situation, and it's not totally easy to navigate navigate in them. But maybe the big difference between our system and the Swedish one, for example, is that I am a candidate as a person. So I have to have my own campaign. I have to gather my own funds and do my own campaign thing. I can't only rely on the party.
Yeah, how do politicians get the funding? Because it's a topic, for example. Well, if you go to America, for example, there are many discussion about the lobbying and huge amount of money that it's allowed to be poured into some candidates' campaigns, and then they of course, or not of course, it depending, but they result into politician steering decision towards big corporate. Yes. How does it work in Finland?
In Finland, we have campaign financing law, so every person from a single entity you can receive at the most 6,000 euros. If it's 1,500 euros or above, then the donor will be registered. So you have to register the name of the donor.
So it's a public knowledge.
Yes. So if somebody wants to give me money for my campaign but doesn't want his or her name to show, then the amount has to stay below 1,500.
Yes.
But it can't be over 6,000.
Yeah.
And during the campaign, you are obligated to declare the money that you get, and then that will be public information, and it will be scrutinized.
Yes. Okay.
So after the election, they ask you to send in your bank account information, and then they check all the transactions.
Okay.
In both directions, and if there is some discrepancy, then of course you have to correct it.
Yes.
And
yes, and we know that then you are in trouble.
And then you are in trouble. Yes.
Okay, so you belong to the Swedish party.
Yes.
You said, of course, as you said, that you have some foundations already built in the long term. And you belong to a party with its own core values.
Yes.
And there are topics that are like almost mandatory to address.
Yes.
So what is your main focus at the moment? What is the thing that you feel in your campaign is the most important? The thing that you feel closest to you?
Yes. Well, the themes that I have been bringing up, or that I feel are my core themes, is the economy, entrepreneurship in general, Finland as a part of the international community, and a part of that is of course like the immigration questions, the availability of work and workers in Finland. I think the fact that Finland can't close its borders or think that we are so self-sufficient, but we are reliant on international cooperation and the influx of people to Finland. Then a third theme is the environment in general. I mean, I'm an architect by profession, so how we build, how we construct, and climate issues related to that. So those are my principal themes. And then of course the current situation also leads to security in general being a theme. I'm a member of the defense committee in Parliament, and through that, of course, defense and security issues are on my agenda too.
Okay, I pick from this last. You have been quite. You didn't shy off to say that you wanted to belong to NATO.
Yes.
You were one of the first to just say, hey, yes. And also you don't shy away from expressing your support towards Ukraine.
Yes.
And the fact that Europe should be more involved with heavier weapons.
Yes.
And so you have taken quite a stand.
Yes.
And did you just go with your guts or with your opinion and you said that this is the right thing to do, so I do it? Or did you ponder are there consequences?
Of course, you in a way you ponder consequences, but then of course you have to do politics in a way that you have to look yourself in the mirror and kind of do the right thing as you feel it. So if you feel, you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
I remember slightly over a year ago, in December of 21, I wrote this piece about NATO, that we should start the application process now.
Yes.
And it created quite a lot of headlines. At that point, below 20% of Finns were in support of NATO. But I thought it was the right thing to do. 2 years before that, Al-Hol was the biggest issue in Finland. I don't know if you remember it. I mean, the fact that there are some Finnish peoples in Al-Hol that probably have done some bad things, that even so it's our responsibility to try to help them and bring them back.
Yes.
At that point, I mean, Al-Hol was like political kryptonite. Nobody dared to say anything about it. And then I wrote a piece that got huge circulation in Finland. And I don't know if that changed the discussion, but I think it to some extent moved it in the discussion, so that the government then said that, okay, we have to help these people, and then they started bringing them back.
Yeah.
Now,
so you wanted things to move.
Yeah, I want things to move, and then I think that you have to stand for the things that you believe in.
Yes.
And I think the political climate for immigration issues is quite harsh in Finland. But somebody has to talk for the fact that Finland needs international contribution, and we need immigration.
Yes.
And that a diverse Finland is not weaker, it's like stronger and better.
And most likely it's not possible to avoid.
And it's not possible to avoid even.
That's probably also what like this about the war, that like once it's there.
Yes.
So it's why would you put your head in the sand?
No, yes.
So like so that's it's better to take the topic and try to analyze it from left and right and
and I think that what is the outcome that we want, and how do you reach that outcome? Can you try to like slowly like just move on and do as little as possible, try to mess as little as possible, or do you really have to somehow think that what could help? Will that help us? And in this case, Ukraine, reach the end we want it to reach, and what would that goal then imply? What does it require from us, and how could we contribute? And then that leads to the fact that I think that, I mean, Europe should step up, and I think Finland can step up also.
Yeah, of course, like you are a politician in Finland, a small country, you are known, so of course what you say will always have some sort of echo.
Yes.
It will affect. But how does, when I'm thinking about this, the fact that you wanted to get more people involved and talk, how much Finland and Finland's voice can steer Europe or can have effect? Because anyway, the European legislation is above.
Yeah. If you talk about, I think about this Ukraine question.
But yes, exactly. For example.
Okay. Well, it's hard to say, and it's of course you never really know what leads to what. But the text that we put out a few days after Christmas, it caused quite a lot of discussion in the whole of Northern Europe, in Ukraine, Eastern Europe, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, the Baltics. I think that it drove...
So you were referring about the tanks.
Yeah, the tanks, tank issue.
Yes, because you said that you wanted these new generation tanks to be sent and heavily.
Yes.
Then I guess you wanted also probably to... You were referring about the role of Germany.
Yes.
And like how do we get like superpowers to jump on the train on board.
Yes, and the idea was that if you build a big European coalition where everybody gives a little, then of course nobody will be the focal point of whatever countermeasures that Russia wants, but you kind of like spread the burden, and then that would also, of course, make it easier for Germany to say yes, because as it's a German tank in this case, they can say yes or no, and that will like either allow it or
of course, it's a bottleneck.
So it's kind of a bottleneck. And that piece of ours created quite a lot of discussion. Now, a few days ago, Germany, France, and the US said that they will send Bradleys and Marders and this AMX, this French version. Poland has now said that it's open to Leopards.
Yeah.
Some Swedes and Danish politicians have said that they would also be open for this. Now the situation has already like evolved to the next step here in Finland. So It moved. I think it moved, and I think well, I think it's quite probable that in the end it will lead to us all providing. And it's of course maybe kind of, there's some hubris maybe in saying that our text put this moving, but I think our text did help in get the discussion going. And in that sense, I think that in these kind of difficult matters that nobody maybe really wants to touch, when you touch it, you might cause quite a big movement or a big change.
What about immigration? That was one of your other main focus. Do you think you have the same and you can have the same impact on when we talk about European Union? Because it seems that everyone now is standing behind when everyone got afraid of the war, big consequences. So do we have to face a crisis before we stand behind things united? Because the European Union, it is an agreement rather than maybe, it doesn't, the roots are not into a common culture, they are not into a common language. There is not like the United States of America that they have. So do we really need something shocking to put us together? And when we think about immigration, do we our immigration problem is different than Polish immigration, that is different than German and Italian.
Yes, and I would say, I mean, in Finland, I mean, I would challenge the idea that we have an immigration problem in any other sense, that we have too little of it.
I agree.
But yes, I think the Ukrainian war has shown that the EU is more functional than we thought. That an external crisis can cause change, and it can lead to us being able to more effectively act together. But it's not a federal state. We don't have, I mean, the legal, the levels of I mean, our agreements are not that binding. We don't have really tools to use towards, for example, a country that like Hungary that openly. Openly tries to somehow break things apart rather than build it, and so on. So I think the European Union, it's like at a crossroads in a way. We should either make it more loose, or then we should take a step and make it more like a federal state, and try to at least find some areas where we have more binding
some leverage
and some areas where we might not I mean, now we have to reach consensus to make agreements, and that leads to Hungary, for example, being able to hinder us aiding Ukraine. So maybe we should have some areas, like for example foreign policy, where you don't have to have unanimous support, but maybe like a clear majority
nothing
should be enough. And I think that's a discussion that we have to somehow take at some point.
But then if we go now, let's go back smaller into Finland about this immigration problem. I think of course it's for me, being originally Italian and being now an adopted Finnish, it is a wide topic, and it is sometimes misunderstood, because also inside immigration and the word immigrant, there might be differences. So we might have we might have highly educated people that are immigrants. We might have immigrants that they are coming studying on a student visa, working. They might be with a different kind of education or with not education. And then of course we have refugees that normally tend to be separated between immigrants and refugees. But on a broader spectrum, sometimes they also they are put inside the same basket. So how do we start breaking this big problem into small pieces and into action points? What is anyway, you have a campaign going, you have been taught this for sure.
Yes, I mean, I think, I mean, when I go to talk with somebody from the Finns party, for example, about immigration, I try to talk about like the big concept, and the representative of the Finns party talks about immigration having the picture of a 25-year-old Iraqi man in his or her mind.
Yeah, so there are stereotypes.
There are like
stereotypes. The true Finns might
Yes.
have a certain kind of stereotype. Yes.
And whereas, I mean, the biggest chunk of immigration last year was work-related immigration, and as a whole, humanitarian immigration is only one part, and actually, refugees are a very tiny part of our immigration. Humanitarian, somebody that comes that gets a refugee status in Finland, I mean that number is not very big, but the big chunk is work-related immigration. Another big chunk is study-related immigration. Then of course we have family reunification that also like is a considerable part. But in general, I mean people, even when you take immigration as a whole, the employment rate among immigrant men in Finland is bigger than employment rate among native Finns.
Okay,
because the demographic structure of immigrant men, for example, is such that they are mostly in the working age, whereas the demographic structure of men in Finland are like they're like kids and pensioners
and elders.
among
Yes.
and for the same reason, for example, the dependence on social security is less among immigrants than in the working population. This is according to a study that Libera, this liberal think tank, made a few years
Does
ago.
this mean that they don't have access to social help and social services, or is it because just they are?
No, they have access, but the demographic structure is such.
But did anyone make a study in which it was tried to put only the same age span of people against each other?
Yeah, then of course when you do that, then it's different. But even so, work-related immigrants are more employed than the native population. Study-related immigrants are more employed than the native immigration. Then of course, like refugees that come from humanitarian reasons, they are less employed.
Yes.
But with time, they get almost as well employed as native people, which just means that getting integrated just takes time.
Yes.
And when you talk about integration, studies show that the biggest one of the biggest, if not the biggest, factor here is the general attitude in society. So if you have a society where it's easy to settle down, where you are welcomed, where you are given a chance, then integration is much easier. But if we talk about immigration as something that it's like a threat, something that where somebody comes here and tries to dilute Finnish society or change our culture or whatsoever, take my wife and my job and everything, then of course it becomes much more difficult, and then integration might not work. So it's, to a large extent, it's a question about attitudes.
Can you define what is for you integration? What is an immigrant coming here when it is integrated?
Well, a very good friend of mine, a family member actually, he's lived in Finland for almost 20 years now. He doesn't speak Finnish, he doesn't speak Swedish, he speaks English, but if he's fully employed, he's fully integrated. So I don't think that integration, it doesn't necessarily mean that you speak Finnish or Swedish, but you have found your place in society and you contribute to society. I think that's integration.
Because, for example, there is there are many initiatives that, as you might know, of course, and you surely know that, for example, Helsinki does as a city to integrate, and because then it's breakdown into organization also, or like Business Finland is doing especially, and to integrate, or there are universities that do talent boosts or they do integrations, and so there are different levels. But one of the topic in the working industry is retention. So you might have a person that is integrated in the sense that it's an immigrant that came from abroad. He has salary, he belongs to the social security network and services, and has access to the hospital services and everything, every service. He might have some friend, but he's gone in 1-2 years because he is on the paper part of the society and part of the Finland, but is not actually then maybe this is like difficult to say in words, but he's not bonded emotionally, and his life is not rooted in here, because he did not actually then integrate in a deeper sense. So I guess you understand what I'm trying to say. That like of course it's almost impossible to measure, because it's a data that you have to go to each one and say like, do you feel you belong here, or are you going to leave in 2 years? But when you are thinking about funding and allocate as a politician maybe funds to certain initiative, I believe it is as much important as to get people here, and it's as important to keep them here. So how do we keep them here? How do because it's a double. There are two problems to address. I don't want to go too much into the true Finns and the fact that there is probably a reason why there is one party that is against this, and all the other parties are aligned on the same. As like Finland needs.
Pretty much.
Pretty much like that. That of course there are some minorities, but it's pretty a given. The COVID has given us also tools to understand like how workforce can switch in 1 year from one place to another suddenly. Then all the for example, all the restaurant industry and catering, they suffered a lot from the loss of employees, and so there has been a huge shuffle, and then there has been problem with the overwhelming work shift for the hospital. So also there we have lack of personnel, and then we have aging population, so we don't have people to take care of elders. So we all know, sitting on a table, that we need more people. So, and we need specialized people, or we need people that we have to train to a certain direction. So aside from the boogeyman, and that someone is afraid of the boogeyman, we all know that somewhere we need people. But then we need people that the Finn pay taxes, and the taxation go into programs to bring people here, but also to retain them here. Otherwise it's a lost investment.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of things in there. I mean, as a general, I think Finland can't rely on immigration to solve its like big structural problems. We can't fix the healthcare crisis just by like importing workers. We also, of course, have to make the work itself attractive, and we have to make the work such that there are like enough resources that people want to do the work. Then some of them are born here, and then probably some of them might be born somewhere else, but they're like two different problems. But as a general, I mean, the attitude. But the general problem is the attitude. I mean, we instead of thinking how to enable people to enter the country, we kind of try to find reasons for them not to stay here, or for not to come here. We have this strange perception of something that we call like attraction factors. That attraction factor, that in a general sense should be good. I mean, it means that Finland is attractive. That's a bad thing, that we should somehow cleanse ourselves from attraction factors so that nobody would want to come here. When, I mean, for obvious reasons, I think the situation should be totally the opposite. In Helsingin Sanomat, there was this article slightly before Christmas about a Mongolian nurse that lived in Finland, that had studied in Russia and Finland, that had learned Finnish, was a nurse and wanted to stay here. But Migri made a mistake and somehow didn't understand one document that she had provided.
So the immigration office.
The immigration office, and actually practically forced her to leave, or was about to force her to leave the country. She managed to change that decision then finally, but through a very long and tedious process, which made her so fed up with Finland that she chose to leave altogether. So instead of seeing that here we have a person who has integrated, knows the language, who works in a field where we are desperately in need of people, the mindset should be keeping them here instead of finding small mistakes that might give us the excuse of sending them away. Or, for example, a student that comes here to Finland, studies
I know you have personal experience on this.
I have a personal experience actually on a slightly different topic. We had an exchange student in our family. You could call him a mathematical genius. He would have been able to study physics and mathematics in Helsinki, but he would have had to go through the Open University for a few months to prove his abilities, and then he could enter the other way into the university. But that wasn't good enough for the immigration authorities, so they didn't give him a permit, so he moved to Sweden, and now he develops quantum computers for a big international company. So Finland lost that guy. Yeah. But in general, when people come here to study, we should do all we can to keep them. But now it's instead... they have to ask permission to stay afterwards, which is so massively backwards in so many ways. Because if they don't stay, then we have really lost the effort we have put into educating them. For some people, if they come from the outside of the EU, they also pay for their studies themselves. So it's really like a benefit to society that they have paid for themselves, and even so
they contribute to the whole system.
Even so it's not automatic that they can stay afterwards, and this is also like massively counterproductive. So somehow we should turn everything around and really start to think about how to attract people and how to get them to stay here, instead of even to the slightest degree suggesting that maybe this is something that you need a permit for, or where we actually would want you to leave instead of stay.
Okay, so you're saying that the bureaucratic system and the rules are so that they prevent even to think about, like, is it Finland attractive enough? Because the problem is at the foundation because I read an article that 97% of the application for students are granted, and it takes something like 2 months.
Yes.
So it is like to apply as a student, it seems that it's like agile, fast, and quite secure to get.
Yeah. Yes.
So, but then you're saying that still, anyway, the bureaucracy. Everyone who has been in Finland and had to deal with the Finnish bureaucracy knows that even if you have a comma that is not correct, it's going to be a terrible mistake.
Yes.
It's going to cause many troubles down the line. So is this because no one wants to make a mistake? Because the bureaucrats, well, I don't want to say it in a negative way, but people that work in the offices, governmental offices, and they don't want to make a mistake to have their own. They have stain on themselves. Why so? Why so tight?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to some extent, I think in Finland, the bureaucratic heritage that we have is to some extent a heritage that comes from the time when Finland was a part of Russia in the 19th century. So there is something. I mean, there's something of. The bureaucratic core. It's what we call virkamiehet. They are independent, so you can't really. When you want to steer them somehow, you have to do it through legislation. You can't give them orders because they are kind of independent, and that's good in many ways, but it also might lead to these strange bureaucratic situations. But in general, as far as immigration goes, I think there's this attitude that people are coming here and try to trick us. And they are scheming and try to trick us into letting them in, and then we try to find a way to somehow
so it's not a mistake,
uncode their tricky schemes and find out how they try to fool the system, whereas one could somehow approach it from a different direction.
So we go back. Even if we are facing the bureaucracy and we are facing paperwork, you think that is still the attitude behind.
Yes.
That there is this fear of the other.
Yes. Well,
fear of the unknown, fear of the difference.
So. Yes.
So how come that anyway, if we think about the perussuomalaiset of the true Finns, they get votes, but they never exceeded anyway in a way that you would say, like, this mentality belongs to each Finnish.
Yes.
But why so Finns So how spread is this mentality? Why? How do you think? Do you think that we don't see that much in the daily routine, but people, even if they are well educated, they still have some stereotypes.
Yeah.
Even if they vote for you, they still have some stereotypes.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say. I mean, in general, I think that Finns. I mean, we're like a nice and friendly population in general. And when you ask, for example, a Finnish company who has employed a foreigner, they are immediately more prone to employ the next one.
Absolutely.
So in general, the experience is very positive. But to take the first step, that's like difficult, because then you have to change your culture a little bit, and you have to maybe communicate internally in a different way, and then you might have to overcome your prejudices also.
Yes.
And in the same way, when you interview Finns, they like the immigrant they know, but they don't like the immigrant that they heard of.
Yes.
That they like the grey mass that somehow, according to them, represents the real picture. I mean, the one I know, that's an exception, and he's nice.
He's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
He's a good girl.
But I heard about those, and those are suspicious.
Yes.
Yes, I think it's probably human nature. Maybe that's how we all are. That we have to know something to somehow be able to see through the propaganda or the stereotypes that are painted. But even so, it's counterproductive.
Yeah, I want to see the roots somewhere, probably in the past or somewhere deeper or in longer time behind, because if I think about countries like, I am from Italy and or France, Italy did not have colonies, but anyway, countries that had that colonies, they have had immigration forced. Of course, that was slavery at that point. It wasn't immigration, but they have seen, they have gone through this kind of situation long ago. Or then if I think about Italy and what is the story behind Italy, how it's been fragmented under different kingdoms, after different tribes before that, and coming from Middle East, coming from south, from north, left and right, from everywhere. So the attitude is more like, live your good life and let the other live.
Yeah.
And there is more acceptance also, like there is not such... I can say from an Italian that I don't know racist jokes, so it's not even a topic to have fun with. But I've heard racist jokes in Finland.
Yes.
And so Finland probably has been for such a long time a close community.
Yes.
Called close tribes, that they had to survive the harsh nature and the environment and help each other on a daily routine. So that you fish and you share, you cut wood and you share, you build and you share. You are so tight to everyone you know around that you start to mistrust people that come from outside, and they start to break this lovely picture. But aren't we a bit over that?
One would think, but I think, change is slow, and I think your analysis is pretty correct that Finland has been so isolated for such a long time, and an urban environment in Finland is something new, a situation where you like meet people when you walk on the street. It's almost like something new in Finland. For example, if you walk on a lonely street and somebody comes against you, people don't say hi to each other.
No,
there's the only ones that are walking there, like in the middle of the winter or so. So people are. They keep things for themselves, and then of course, if there's friends and family, then it's different. But you don't talk to strangers in Finland.
Yeah.
And here, Sweden is totally different. In Sweden, if you meet somebody on an empty street, everybody says hi.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. But then again, like if reading through, of course, like Facebook, social media, they are not probably the most reliable sources of any information. But it's a platform, and there are platforms in which people feel free to just say whatever.
Yes.
Because they think that there is no consequences, or there is no no one keeps track on things, but of course might not be the real situation. But many people in Finland, especially if we talk about more people with a more extreme and extremist view on immigration, not saying that people are extremist, but their ideas are more probably right-hand sided. Many times they actually put the finger and they say, we don't want to become like Sweden.
Yes.
So
yes.
actually, we are saying that like, okay, Sweden has a more open mind, and attitudes that more of acceptance, and they have had like systematic immigration for longer.
Yes.
So, but many Finns that are against, they actually point out to that system as a huge failure.
Yes. Yes.
What is your opinion?
Well, I mean, Sweden, if Sweden didn't have the immigration it has had, the population of Sweden would be around 7 million at the moment, and now it's like 10, 11. Without the immigration it has had, its economic situation would be much worse, its demographic situation would be much worse. In Finland, we talk about what they call kestävyysvaje, a structural deficit. The reason for our structural deficit is our demographic situation. We are... Since 1987, for every one person we have gained in the workforce, we have 8 more pensioners, for example, retired people.
Oh yes.
So
it's not a sustainable situation.
No, so it's not sustainable. I mean, we need a younger population. We need immigration also because of that. And Sweden doesn't have the problem because it has had immigration for such a long time. And having immigration, it has also like internationalized Swedish society, which also reflects on how well they do in the export market.
Yes.
According to a study made in University of Örebro, when you hire somebody with a foreign background, it directly correlates with increased exports for your firm, for example.
Okay.
So there is a clear cause and effect here. So I mean, both Finland and Sweden are among the safest countries in the world.
Yes.
Sweden isn't unsafe either, but of course now lately they've had this uptick in certain kinds of violent crimes that you should be of course concerned with. I mean, they are done in a different way that they are used to. In Finland we stab each other usually in our home, but in Sweden they have some gangs have started shooting each other at the street.
But this gang kind of like this motive, this trend actually surfaced in Finland too.
To some extent, but in Finland, I mean, we have like...
of course, it's a small part.
It's a very tiny number of people, but there are like some signs.
Yes, but
nobody has yet been killed in any of those.
Yes, but also, but it has been targeted, or it has been anyway said that the people, these gangs are frequently from not integrated families or races, and there is a bit of micro criminality, organized criminality, and drugs.
Yes.
So I don't agree. But I understand the logic that someone might have behind that.
Yes.
We get more immigrants, we get more of this problem. So why would we do that?
Yes.
I think this thought doesn't bring everything into place, but it's not enough to just think, okay, how do we attract people? It's not enough how we make the system and the bureaucracy leaner. It's not even, let's talk about this problem with people that don't understand it fully. We have to call upon all the system. So when you were talking about the fact that you are an architect, you also have to get these people somewhere, and you have to help them get into the society.
Yes.
So spread them around, and so how much these problems are breaking down into pieces when you actually make a plan, because then we have to go to talk about the budget. We have to go and talk like, okay, where do we put the money to do this? Yeah,
and in general, I mean, I think when you look at Finnish society, we can pinpoint different groups of people where different problems are more common than in other groups, and We can find areas in Finland where problems are bigger than in other places.
Yes.
We can find social groups where they are bigger. We can find even parties that are more prone to party members that are more prone to criminality than in other parties. So I think it's. I mean, but then if you only attack it through those kind of through that perspective, that who is this group and where do they belong? Come from, what's their ethnicity or party affiliation or sex or whatever, then you use like a really blunt tool to somehow treat a problem that is maybe more refined. So as far as gang criminality goes, I mean, immigrant groups are overrepresented and to a very high degree, but so are, for example, social problems. So then you can say that is the cause the ethnicity or the social situation of this person.
Definitely.
So is it that they don't find their place in society, that they have been like dropped out of school? Maybe that is the major driver and not the birthplace.
Absolutely.
And then when you find those causes, then I think it's easier to take care of them, because if you don't look through it like that, then we suddenly start regarding everybody that comes from that ethnic group as a gang member or a criminal, and that then leads to much more problems. Racism then leads to more. Then it's so it easily just escalates the problem instead of somehow trying to treat it.
Yeah, but I absolutely understand. I just try to understand the job of a politician. Then, when the problem it's the writing is on the wall. The problem is there. Everyone knows.
Yes.
And then you have to break it down and you understand like what are all the pieces of the chain and what has to be considered. How do you then make this to become a promise? Now, you talked about this environment, the entrepreneurship, and the fact that immigrants are an important part, and then you have this. Anyway, this the three that came from your speech, the safety of the country. So already there you have like three huge problems, and then you have to have real budgeting and you have to have real action points.
Yes.
So how do you strip down these mega problems into something that can actually sound familiar to the people and can make the people decide that, okay, I trust this guy.
Yes.
Anders have thought this problem upside down, and he has come with a solution, and he has a roadmap to that.
Yes.
How?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think, in a sense, of course, like a politician, you represent your values, and you can't immediately say that the answer to this problem is that, and the answer to that problem is that. But you are, of course, faced with new situations, and I think, of course, but you have to provide the sense that you are able to like judge facts and take different things into account, and then you have some sound reasoning and value base that people feel that they trust in. So you have to like give a sense, of course, like convey a sense that you can trust your judgment. But then, of course, every politician and I also, I mean, you have certain things that you say that I think this is a priority and these things I will do. So if we just talk about how we build, or how our education system is, or how our labor market is, or our defense situation, I can give like bullet points of all of these where I say that these are the high priority things that I think we should do, and these are the problems that we should attack, and this is my solution for them.
How big of a team you have behind you? Because you were talking about the article, you were saying, I cite you, we put out.
Yes.
So plural. And then if we think about this, you cannot be an expert in all of the topics, in finance, education, healthcare. So how big of a team you have behind you, or
my team is pretty much me. So every parliamentarian has an assistant that takes care of some practical things, but usually, I mean, I write all my stuff myself.
Yes.
And the one that we put out, that was an article I wrote together with Atte Harjanne, a Green politician. So we wrote that together, and I think I can talk for him also. I think that he pretty much writes his own stuff. So we wrote that together. So in Finland, as a politician, as a parliamentarian, unfortunately, you don't have a big staff. And in a way, I mean, it's good because then you have to think things through. The things I use my assistant for is, I mean, practical things, but then she also, of course, investigates things for me.
Yeah.
So if I have an idea, then I ask her to investigate how much that would cost or what it might lead to. Or if there's a complicated piece of legislation, I might ask her to digest it into the main point so that I can read it through fast. If there's been a hearing that I haven't been to, then I ask her to read all the papers and summarize it somehow. So I use her for investigating stuff. But in general, I mean, in 95% of cases, everything I put out, I write myself. All the speeches I make, I write myself.
And the plan for the campaign also is.
No, the plan for the campaign then that's a bigger group, my campaign group, which is a bunch of volunteers that feel that they want to support me and help me in this campaign. Then we just sit down together, as we will do actually the day after tomorrow again, and go through the things that are ahead of us.
You don't have like a marketing office behind it that creates the banners with the right color, the right motto.
No. Actually, as I'm an architect, I have some experience in graphic design, and I've been doing that. So I do that myself. Yes.
Yes. So you have topics that are close to you, and they represent your values. I guess we have seen some of your values, therefore. But there is a problem. There is the elephant in the room that every politician have to address.
Yes.
And it is the debt.
Yes.
So, well, of course, we faced crisis. No one has ever tried to do a politics of the debt because, of course, everyone knows where it goes. Even though many other countries they've been doing such debt game for long, but you start think that like, okay, if we always would have had as much money as we wanted, we would have just played all the time at getting, let's solve this problem, let's solve that, just pump more money in. And now we are at the moment in which we had to pump it. Some might be of a different opinion, but I was just checking 142 billions. So we all want to improve, but we don't want to stress the taxes. We don't want to cut the entrepreneurship. So we cannot tax at the bottom. We cannot tax at the top. And we don't want to kill a middle wage class. So how do we? It's difficult. I don't think you can. But what's the? How do you think this can be addressed?
Yes. I mean, the debt discussion is big in Finland, and for good reason. I mean, during this period, we've taken quite a lot of debt, which, to the most part, is due to the Corona crisis and now the war. And of course, if I am a politician for a while, then I could of course argue that the opposition parties, they are criticizing the debt, but actually their alternative budgets are pretty much in the same ballpark as ours. Actually, the truth is, their solution would have raised the same amount of debt and actually slightly more if you'd take their speeches for real. Kokoomus, the other main opposition party, would have taken slightly less debts, but they would have been used. They have been used some finicky schemes for borrowing from the pension funds. So their official figures are not entirely true, but even so. So I mean, in general, some party would have taken 37 billion during this period, some 40 billion, some 39. So we are pretty much in the
even
same.
If we are talking about billions, so it's not the same, but
in the same ballpark. But of course, it is, as you said, that you throw good money at a problem, and that might work if you think that this was the last pandemic, this was the last war, but we can't be sure of that. So if there is a crisis around the corner, I think we have to relate to that differently. And in general, I mean, the sustainability gap that we have has to be tightened somehow. And at the same time, all parties have said that we have to grow our R&D funding. We can't cut from education. We have to increase our defense funding. We have to put more money into healthcare. And then one thinks that from where do we get the 7, 8, 9 billion that we need to cut? It's not totally self-evident from where you take it.
And there is no magician hat.
Yes, so there's no magician hat. So I think, I don't have an answer for you. We have our party has certain issues where we can cut money from, none of which will be very popular. In general, I think the stability has to come from growing employment, from economic growth. But I do think that, for example, some benefits probably will need to get cut. I think unemployment benefits, the structure of it should be cut so that it's maybe slightly shortened the time where you get income-related unemployment benefits, and then you'd have to lower it as time goes by according to this Danish model that several parties are speaking for. Ours also, but that's not like 8 billion. That's quite a small chunk. Then some parties want tax cuts. I think we would also want tax cuts, but I think it's frankly unrealistic to expect, or at least it's unrealistic to say now that we can do that next year, because we don't know how the world is going. We don't know how this energy crisis will evolve. So there's a lot of uncertainty. But I mean, the debt issue is for real. It has to be tackled. The next crisis that comes, we have to act differently. We can't throw money at the same extent at it as we have done. So I think we all hope that things will stabilize, but in this, you can never say never.
Yes, once the corona was almost over, then Russia, and then who knows what's the next. But I was, of course, if someone would have a magic wand and say like, okay, we do like this, and then suddenly all that would be already done. But I cite Timo Heinonen from the National Coalition Party that. I'm not saying that he is the inventor, but he was talking in the A Talk at the television. He was talking, I think, making a lot of sense. And it to me, this talk, what I'm saying now, it shows me something that belongs to the Finns. He was saying that the debt and the way the debt will be diminished has to be considered and taken in account as a multi-year program that overcome mandates from one to the other party and one to the other election. So because it's not something that anyone can do in one mandate. So I think that's something that, for example, brought me to light the fact that Finns can, for a while, or maybe even like practically, can for a while take away the fact that they have a suit, they have the Kokoomus, they have the National Coalition Party suit, so they want their agenda, but they stripped off their clothes for a second and think like, okay, what's the best for Finland? So what's the real thing that we can do to address the problem, because we are at the end of the day neighbors. So I think that was something that I really respect the idea behind, like, and do something concrete. So have you considered, or is there been talk about, because coalition then they change also how the government it's formed, and now the National Coalition Party is willing to go along with the true Finns when before they didn't. So it seems that like the balance can shift, but how can we keep the eyes on the balls? How can we keep everyone aligned to drop the debt? Because it doesn't serve your kid, doesn't serve my kid, doesn't serve my neighbor, doesn't make my neighbor happier, me happier. How do we?
I mean, it's not easy. I think in general sense, I think it would benefit Finland if we'd have better long-term planning. For example, tax policy, it's something that's up in the air every budgetary negotiations.
Yes.
Where
Why?
you should, and then you compare to Estonia, where they had pretty much the same tax policies as the 90s.
Yes.
I mean, we should be able to lock certain things over opposition government, like borders, and somehow cross the aisle in that sense to create predictability in our economy. And yes, as he said, and I think most parties agree that balancing the economy is not like a thing that you do in 4 years, but it probably take 8 years.
Yes.
And of course, that might be much faster if the economy grows faster, but it of course might go slower if we have an economic
or some other crisis. Yes, we don't know.
Yes, but I had some thought when you mentioned that now somehow evades me.
About this getting united behind something. I think that's some kind of
I think that's
national pride.
I think that's a good side of the Finnish system, and it has become slightly more difficult with the rise of the true Finns, as their political idea in many things is to be against everybody else.
Yes.
Whether it's EU policy, environmental policy, or something else.
Yes.
So I think before it would have been easier, and I think among the other parties it probably would be doable, but knowing their way of doing politics, it's more difficult today than it was before.
So why should and would people vote for you and your party? I think you've shown now the thought behind and how your process is, and you ponderate and you try to think about the big picture.
Yes.
You don't want to address in a blunt way some circumstances, rather think about the big picture. You want to drive growth with entrepreneurship. You want a leaner way to get working immigrants to come and stay. And you would like to do all this in a greener way.
Yes.
So why should people believe that what you are saying, considering that an epidemic can come, or how that can you prioritize and can you keep this from the end from the beginning until the end?
Yeah, I mean, our party is not big. We have a fairly stable support, which also leads to us actually not having to react to every storm around us. We don't have to look at what everybody else does and try to micromanage our own position accordingly. We can go on the path that we believe in.
Yes.
And through that, I think we are the only reliably liberal center-right party in Finland that dares to speak positively about immigration, dares to speak positively about the European Union, is socially liberal in a coherent and predictable way, and in that position on the map, if you're like internationally minded and believe in Finland as a part of the international community, I mean, there are no other parties actually. Then, of course, we have the baggage of being a party that has identified merely with the Swedish-speaking minority. That's like a problem of ours, because that has slightly raised the bar for other people to vote for us. But if we overcome that, I think there's many reasons for us being bigger than we are today. But anyways, I think this unique position that we have on the political field should make us like uniquely attractive for much more than 5% of the voters.
Okay, and if you would have now finally a magic wand and you could change something suddenly, what it would be? Or make something different, or whatever, magic. You can do whatever you want. In politics, yes.
In politics, like one thing, one magic wand.
One wish granted.
Yes. Okay. So if I keep my wish like realistic, so that it relates to real legislation. I mean, real things that can be changed without a huge financial impact. Then I think that the labor market structure as we have it today, where you have all encompassing agreements, I think those should should and will benefit from being decided on a more local level. That's what we call local dealings. It's a structure they have in Sweden, they have in Denmark, but that we don't have in Finland. I think it would greatly benefit the economy and
more
entrepreneurship in general.
liberative way.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your time, and I'm pretty sure that listeners have enjoyed you and listening to you. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Giaco.
Bye.